Test, test, test.
Closer? Good evening? Okay.
Yeah, usually if you do one of these, it goes into left. That's usually a good measurement.
Good evening.
That's good.
Test, test, test. One, two, three. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, it's me. Sorry. User error. Okay, folks, we're going to call our meeting to order. So tonight is September 14th, 2021. This is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. I'd ask if everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And just a housekeeping thing, I don't see any issues with it tonight, but I just want to remind everyone that due to the school committee policy and the governor's mandate, we do need everyone to wear masks in school buildings. I don't see anybody who's not, so thank you very much for cooperating with us there. Next item would be a roll call. If one of the clerks could please call the roll.
Greg Blasball.
Here.
Lisa Hildebrand. Here. Jennifer Hoskins. Here. Jennifer Lima. Jake Mather. Here. Sally Schott. Here. Brooke Thompson. Here. Gabrielle Anthony.
Thank you. And I'll also mention, most people know how this works by now, but folks that might not, we do have a sign-up list for citizens' comments. If you could please put your name and address down there, and we'll get to that shortly. So if you could please call the calendar.
Tuesday, September 28, 2021, School Committee Business Meeting. Tuesday, October 12, 2021, School Committee Business Meeting.
Thank you. And next we have a presentation on district-wide mental health services by Dr. Carson.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Auger, Chairman and members of the school committee. Thank you for allowing me to give a brief presentation about the district's mental health needs and an RFP that recently was submitted and bidded upon. As educators, we're aware of the challenges that COVID-19 pandemic has brought to our schools and our communities, and our school staff and families are faced with the lack of resources to meet the eroding mental health of many students. Across the nation, mental health challenges have reached epidemic proportions. COVID-19 has served to exacerbate these challenges and created an ambient form of trauma for many of our students. In Washington County, our mental health services were lacking prior to the pandemic and continue to be inadequate as needs increase. In North Kingstown alone, we have students who are waiting 6 months to get appropriate mental health services from our community. The death rate due to suicide in Washington County is higher than the national average and rising. Our mental health students in North Kingstown report experiencing rising levels of anxiety and depression. There's been at least 4 at-risk assessments this week in our middle schools alone as we start our school year. In South County, on average, 22.7% of our high schoolers report having signs and symptoms of depression. This was prior to the COVID pandemic. An average of 8.9 report having suicidal thoughts. 20 students under the age of 20 died by suicide in Rhode Island between 2019 and 2019. Unfortunately, North Kingstown students are part of that statistic. We have students and families, as I mentioned, waiting 6 months or more for psychiatric hospital placements and services. These students have had difficulties attending school without the needed services. For these reasons and the challenges of providing needed intensive services for these students and the availability of our ESSER funds for specialized supports for students post-pandemic prompted the RFP. I'm honored to say that to the committee that Essential School Solutions has been selected as the successful bidder for the RFP through a thorough review of the 2 proposals submitted and based on a rating template included in the RFP. I look forward to working with ESS to provide intensive Tier 3 mental health interventions to address the current and future challenges that NK faces in our school reopening and the mental health challenges that we will face. ESS was chosen due to the comprehensive program outline that you saw in their RFP proposal. Their proposal provides 3 full-time clinicians across our high school and 1 middle school to service 30 high-need students by providing assessment, individual group, and family counseling, crisis intervention, and staff support. In short, this trauma-focused approach provides students and families with Tier 3 interventions to support students in the school setting. Additionally, professional development is offered as part of the proposal to support all teachers and staff in trauma approaches. These clinicians have focused training and support to provide the intensive clinical support, crisis intervention, and family work needed for these students. Without this program, we could see an increase in the number of the students tuition to out-of-district placements, which can cost in excess of $75,000 or more. But it's not about the money. It's about educating, inspiring, and challenging all our students. ESS has done work in districts throughout Rhode Island. They continue to show data from existing programming that indicates student success. The other bidder's proposal is to add staffing, but not the level of student intervention and staff support that the ESS bid provides. The ESS bid has an October 1 targeted start date. The other bidder targeted January, and would provide services already in our schools, not a Tier 3 intervention model. Thank you for your time and support of this initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I think the best thing to do and the easiest way to handle this would be with unanimous consent of the members, unless anyone has an objection, we have an approval of the RFP, which is item D2 on our consent agenda. So I'd ask for unanimous consent to move item D2 up for discussion and approval at this time. Anyone have an objection to doing that? Okay, there are no objections. So best way to start would be if I could get a motion to approve item D2. I have a motion from Ms. Lima and a second from Ms. Hildebrand. So any discussion, any questions for Dr. Carson? Ms. Hildebrand?
Dr. Carson, thank you very much for these very, very thorough descriptions. It took a really long time to make my way through both of them. The one that you just select seems much more robust, and I agree that that October 1st deadline or start date is like really great. I guess my one question, I have other questions too, but the one big question is, you said 2 clinicians in the high school, 1 in the middle schools.
Correct.
How do you envision that working? Because we have 2 middle schools.
Correct.
And also, is there some flexibility in that? Because if you say you find through the work that you're doing that there's actually more of a need in the middle schools than in the high school, can that be moved around?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. Currently looking at the size of the high school and looking at a clinician caseload of approximately 10 students so that they can provide that intensive service. Some of the classroom programming that they would do, we targeted the high school. Also, just given some of our mental health staff only having 2 at the high school, it seemed like to make sense to be able to do that, and given the amount of hospitalizations in the high school. We're currently targeting DMS, but as we go through the assessment process for the students to pick the 10 from the middle school, looking at the assessments that ESS would do and also our current clinicians, we may be able to change and move that as we move forward.
Okay. I actually have one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the professional development for our existing staff, is that something that will happen during your scheduled professional development days, or is this an addition to that? And if you could just describe a little bit about how
Sure.
you envision
Right.
that working.
So the ESS agency does provide newsletters and also monthly newsletters to staff and families. They do 4 family sessions for the families that are included within the programming, but also can do family nights for our community. In addition, they can do professional development during our PD days, either remotely or in person, because we'll have those staff. They can also present during faculty meetings and also during common planning time, because the 2 clinicians at the high school and the 1 at the middle school would be embedded in our school communities.
Okay, that's great. So they can pretty much do whatever it is that you determine you need. Okay. Okay, I'm good.
Anyone else? Ms. Hoskins, I'm just going to go down.
I mean, I definitely have questions about the amount of money that this is going to cost, the sustainability past 1 year. Granted, we're using ESSER funds. That being said, it's not sustainable going forward. It is only, and please don't get me wrong, I am all about mental health. My platform was working with children with mental health and with CELAC and lots of things. But I do have serious concerns that this is a great deal of money for 30 kids.
Well, I mean, if we were to... Thank you, and understandably so. But it is a level of need that we have within our community, and I feel that it is important. It is a high cost, and it is something that we have spoken about as a district team over the years. ESSER was an absolute opportunity to be able to bring this forth at a time when it's probably more necessary than ever to provide our students with support. It is a small amount of students, but if we look at tuitioning those students out, the amount of this grant versus the amount of students we would be able to provide an out-of-district placement for is probably 4 students if we're looking at tuition and transportation costs.
And Dr. O'Shea wanted to comment as well.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to that, as Dr. Carson pointed out, the need is greatest right now, largely due to the isolation a lot of kids have experienced due to COVID. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to see what we experience with this organization and how effective it is. And at the end of the period, we can then assess, like we do everything else, everything, including this program, and if it's indeed what we hope it to be and as effective as we hope it will be, we'll have to make some decisions about what we keep in the budget and what we don't. But for right now, this is being offered to us from the federal government with these kinds of programs in mind because of the isolation and, psychological issues people are dealing with due to the COVID pandemic. So
I guess my subsequent question would be, have you looked at any other remedies for the issues at hand? I believe the ESSER funds, for the next 2 years, we can use them. Actually hiring staff for 2-year contracts that would service more than 30 kids in the district who have issues because of COVID.
I want to ask a quick follow-up question. Is it limited to 30 kids? As I understand,
the RFP as was written was for 30 students. I'm not sure exactly if that would be negotiable if we were to move forward to a contract to look at that. I think we're looking at an intensity of service that is so much different than what our school social workers and psychologists provide. We're looking at some clinical service. We're looking at family work. We're looking at immediate crisis intervention. We're really looking, as when we talk about MTSS, that we're looking at the top tier students, which really should only be about 5% of our population when we're looking at the mental health piece. So if we have our robust core, which would be our current psychologists and social workers, doing their work with open circles, with Second Step, with the things that they do, their individual and group therapies, their IEP services, and then we have them doing some more intensive work with our Tier 2 students. It's really those students that are going to rise up to that top of the triangle under an MTSS model, and a tiered model would be the students we'd be looking at. Again,
it's a lot of money for 30 kids. It's not sustainable past this 1 year. It's not the first time it's been brought to a committee. So it's not because of COVID that this is coming from this company to this committee. You've mentioned it before, you've talked about it, you've discussed it. It's been brought to the committee before. So I think, again, I'm just looking at what point is it the amount of money for 30 kids, and at what point does the health department and the health and insurance cover what these kids need from that mental health standpoint? I think the funds could be spent district-wide.
I had a similar reaction when I saw the amount.
I wanted to go in. I think Ms. Lima, sorry.
Thanks for the presentation. Can you talk a little bit about what type of mental health conditions or that these students might have? I mean, not specifically,
Sure.
but like what type of, that these services are targeted at?
So we have students currently right now who are suffering from depression and anxiety, such that some of them have not been in our school the whole year of last year during the pandemic and continue to be school avoidant, as well as have some significant mental health issues. We have students who are suicidal. We had a student actually just today who sent a picture with a gun to his head. We have some significant kids who are acting out. The survey works and information that we received from Mental Health Awareness Week at the middle school showed kids at alarming numbers saying that they're depressed and anxious. It's been a very difficult year, but those kids with mental health issues will continue to have those. We have students at our schools that have a variety of mental health issues. Some are even such that they have physical symptoms. Either they can't move, or they have undisclosed pain that is not due to any physical, but due to some mental health, anxiety, and other issues that they're having. We have students who are actively suicidal. We have cutters within our community. We have students who are returning from long-term residential hospitalizations for eating disorders who really don't have a level of service that they need to be successful in our schools. To me, it's important that our kids, as many as we can, stay in our school system, getting the quality education that North Kingstown can provide.
Okay, great. One more question.
Sure.
And these services would happen during the school day. Can you talk about when those would actually take place? Would
Sure.
they interfere with their academic time, or how would that work?
We would obviously not want our students out of academic time. Many of our students have a personal learning time that they could use. Some students during advisory, that we would be working with the high school staff to look at their schedules in order to make sure that they had access to those services. Obviously, if a student was in crisis, that would trump everything, as it does even with our mental health that we have in the building, hopefully so that we can provide them with support and unneeded trips to the ER.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Mr. Mather.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I did also have some fairly significant concerns about the budget. This is a $446,000 per year proposal that we can pay for this year using ESSER funds, but once those are expired, we're going to be on the hook for $446,000 a year moving forward, and it doesn't sound like a program that is just for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like an amazing program, and if we can make it sustainable, but $446,000 is a huge amount of money in our budget. And to Jen's point, for a relatively small number of students. And I don't disagree that it's necessary, it's needed. I want to make sure that it's something that's sustainable moving forward after these funds expire, after we don't have them anymore.
I know Dr. Mansouri wanted to speak if she could for a second.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. I really appreciate that. I just want, for the committee's sake, having been the steward of the ESSER funds, and then the following year will be the American Resource Plan. So based upon that, there's federal guidance that the government gives to us. And one of the things they say is, right now you need to look at where the biggest gaps are. So one of the things we have are multilingual learners in our school system. And for a long time, we've not been able to give the actual hours, things that we need to do for those students. So right now, the government's saying what you want to do is you want to bridge that gap. So you want to put as much as you can into that particular thing so that you can get those students to grow further and farther in a smaller amount of time. So what I was able to do is I was able to put money towards that to make our actual, the multilingual teacher specialists in that area to be able to bring those kids to where they need to be if they'd like to use those services. That's one of the things. Second thing is the interventionists. So we only have a certain amount of Title I money that we can do for certain schools in our district that have a need for Title I interventionists. Those students might not come to school having had the advantages that other students have come to, so they might not have being read to every day, or whatever the reason may be, but they come and they do these assessments that we have in the beginning of the year, and they're farther behind. And so often people have said, I wish I could have an interventionist, Denise, and I'm sorry, the Title I money only goes to this school and to this school, I can't do it for you. But with the federal government guidelines and the 5 different things that they told us we could do, we could give high quality instruction and teachers to those particular students that need that extra help, whether they're at Hamilton, whether they're at Quinnesset, whether they're at DMS, wherever it is. I was able to get to hire from our distance learning teachers that we had last year, and we can train them to be interventionists. So there's 3 at the elementary level, and they're divided up between the 3 middle schools. There's 1 at the middle level, and there's going to be 1 at the high school. So we are not going to have those after 2 years either, but if we're going to take a look at the data and we're going to see what's happening, and then they're going to release the American Resource Plan, which is going to, basically people call it ESSER 3, but it's the American Resource Plan. So if we're doing a good job with this and we have the data that looks at it, I'm going to roll that over. Of course, I'm going to be talking to the directors. We're going to be meeting, and we'll make sure that we have the supports. And then we'll be able to do that again for the following year. So when we're looking at the multi-tiered systems of support that Dr. Carson talked about, not only is it academics, it also has to do with behavioral. And the behavioral part is the part that that Dr. Carson is dealing with. And believe me, when you're the principal of a high school and somebody comes in, you have to get the phone call from the police that talks to you about that somebody committed suicide, and you have to walk in to this auditorium and you have to look at every teacher and you have to decide what you're going to do in 15 minutes when all the kids come in. You're going to wish that you had these people here to help out, because you know what happened? Every single person that we had to bring to the high school that day. And Kim led it. So what I'm saying is, if she's saying that we need to do this right now, and I understand it's for 30 people, but if that's my student or your student, you're not going to care. And so if we can do this right now, and then we can do it again the following year, we might save some people. And then we're going to say, thank God we had the opportunity. And that's the guidance. So the guidance comes.
But Dr. Mansieri, I'm not saying not to do it. I'm not saying not to, that these aren't important. I'm just saying, did we look at anything else that would support 50 kids or 60 kids or 80 kids?
And we haven't been able to hire. What happened, we have a couple of people who are looking for social workers right now, and people are hired. I mean, they're coming in, but they don't have certification. We have a lot of people that have some background, but it's been really difficult. I wasn't able to get anybody for the summer schools. We're having difficulty right now. So I absolutely hear you, but I just want you to know that we've done, like, the due diligence has been done, and I just want you to know that she's not coming up here with it's not a wing and a prayer. It's actually been worked on. And so I appreciate the different opinions. I just want you to hear what I have to say.
No, I also think it's worth making a point that if we have these specially trained people to deal with these very high need cases, our own staff, who are tremendous, will have that much more time and ability to service the remaining kids who are also going to need our supports, but maybe not to this extent. So I don't know if just looking at that number 30 is the end all of this equation, that there are a whole list of other kids that are going to get a heck of a lot more attention from our social work supports than they would have otherwise.
Greg, can I say
yeah, absolutely. Ms. Schott.
So my son did have a mental health crisis when he was in high school, very unexpected. And his guidance counselor ended up being the person that helped him, and she didn't have the time to do that, really. But thank God, because she supported me and she supported him. I obviously can't comment on the budget, and it's one person. I'm not trying to have crocodile tears or anything and, emotionally hijack this. But I did just want to come out and say that, because my son, who was an honor society level kid, almost didn't graduate from high school. And it happens, and when you least expect it.
So if I could just ask a couple questions just to clarify some things. So one thing I just want to point and make a couple statements. One thing I want to point out just so everyone understands, because the abbreviations and things that we deal with, a lot of the people I know in this room have been to, I recognize faces, I know a lot of you have been to other meetings, but not everyone has. So we're in a very unique situation in our post-COVID educational world where the federal government is offering substantial, and substantial isn't really even the word for it, very substantial grant funding for very specific types of things. And that's what Dr. Mansieri was referring to, where she's given the ability to apply for federal funds, meaning that they're not coming out of your tax bill, and I'm going to be really specific about that, your North Kingstown tax bill. Now, yes, every one of us pays federal income taxes, so it's coming out of your federal tax bill. But the reality is funds that we don't accept here are just going to go to another district in another town in another state. So, when the funds are available to us, we want to use them. And we have to use them within specific guidelines. They can't be used for just anything. They're supposed to be designed to, and correct me if I go off anywhere here wrong, but to deal with specific post-COVID issues, mental health being one of the very specific ones that's pointed out there. When we talk about sustainability, that is an issue. And Mr. Mather, I agree with you 100%. I have many times had issue with grants that run out. Because it's all great to be able to do something. People get used to a new service or a new thing. The grant runs out, and then the problem becomes, now what? The reality that we're all going to have to understand is that with a lot of these post-COVID grants and a lot of these post-COVID supports, the answer is going to have to be they're going to have to go away. I mean, we are not going to be able to, within our operating budget, sustain this level of support and interventions, whether it be in the academic or the social, emotional, and behavioral side that we're talking about here. But we're also reacting to something that none of us have ever experienced before and that our school district has never experienced before. So to a certain extent, I'm hoping, in the light at the end of the tunnel world, that when these funds start to run out, some, and I don't doubt that all of the need will go away, but some of the most intense need will be in a better place. And as we have to roll back some of these services, we'll be able to absorb them within, our traditional things that we've been able to offer in the past. A quick question, I just want to make sure, are we committing in this approval to expending funds beyond what our grants currently are?
No, you are only, all that Dr. Carson has put forward is for ESSER 2. And that is for this school year, and it's about 10 months worth. It's not the full school year, so it's not even 10 months. It's about 8 or 9 months once they get it kicked up. And then at which time ESSER 3 is approved, that Dr. Mansieri has not yet written, then that will have to extend that, and you'll have to approve that again.
And so
we're not asking you to approve anything that we don't have funds for or approve funds for at this time.
Okay, which means you're right. If in the event something changes and the funds next year don't look like the funds this year, our hard decision might have to come sooner. But
that's sort of the point that I wanted to make, was that I don't disagree with this. I think it's a fantastic program and an awesome opportunity. It's just that we need to be in a place where we're going to have to be making a hard decision in a year from now, in a potentially an extremely hard decision in a year from now.
And I totally agree with that point. I just also want to make a point that if we decide not to do this and we spend the $400,000 on something else, that goes away in a year too. So, the administrative team is looking at this. What do we need? This is what we need right now.
And it can't be spent on just anything.
A year or two down the road, we're going to make some hard decisions about what we can go forward with. We get that. And we'll make those decisions, and they'll come before you, and we'll keep going.
Any further discussion or questions? Right. If not, we have a motion and a second on the floor, so I'd say it's time for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. So moving on with the agenda. We have citizens' comments, so I do need the first sheet off the list, if I could get that, or the first couple, if we can just leave one, just in case people need it. If you could just pass that along. Now, with respect to citizens' comments, I've said this before, I've said it every night. Unfortunately, last meeting we did have an issue that I hope we don't have again. We do ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We ask that you state your name and address for the record, because our clerks need to take that down. The reason for that is simply that we have a lot of people who want to speak. We also have business that we attend to, and we want to give everyone an equal amount of time. And I have an actual timer here so that I'm not treating anyone any differently than anyone else. And I will apply the rule the same whether you're speaking for or against, or whether I agree with you or not. We're just asking you to give everyone else an opportunity to speak as well. So we do please ask if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes. So the first person who signed up to speak is Susanna Tingley. I don't mind that if you want to sort of have an on-deck circle, just if you could keep a little space. You can do that however you'd like, sure. The next person would be Sue Warburton. Right, good point. Next person after that, Sue Warburton. So I'll call the on-deck batter here. Okay. So go ahead. You have the floor.
Susanna Tingley, 750 Hatchery Road. Parents, the school committee is integrating critical race theory, CRT, into school curricula. You can see the signs here in the audience tonight. It won't be announced. It's not a book or a class. It's a socialist ideology that seeks to destroy America. We've allowed Marxists in our country to define us, defame us, slander our ancestors and history, and trash our founding documents and principles. It hides behind social justice to indoctrinate the most vulnerable of society, our youth in public schools. I believe America is worth fighting for, and our children should be taught to honor, respect, and love our country, even with its imperfect history. This is a quote directly from our school website, Educational Equity. To ensure just outcomes for each student, raising marginalized voices and challenging the imbalance of power and privilege. This is a political statement that has no place in a public school. Our new K-5 reading curriculum, Great Minds by Wit and Wisdom, contains CRT, and several states have already removed it. Look for themes that are unpatriotic, dark, and age inappropriate. Watch for themes of conflict, social justice, sexual identity, and race shaming. I oppose the DEI goals from a committee chosen by Ms. Lima of all like-minded participants and party affiliation. Instead of spending $90,000 on an equity audit, I invite Dr. Mansouri and Jody Clark to review the free K-12 non-racist curriculum from the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. Instead of implicit bias training and anti-racist professional development, how about increasing test scores to world-class levels? Instead of burdening students with an ethnic studies graduation requirement, offer it as an elective. Students already examine history and foreign languages that include culture. Of note, our superintendent receives a financial incentive for meeting DEI goals, and the superintendents from the following school districts attend a meeting once a month for their diversity, equity, and equity network: Chariho, East Greenwich, Exeter, West Greenwich, North Kingstown, Jamestown, and Westerly. We all recognize that racism has existed in our country, but it can't be the singular focus. CRT doesn't recognize that things have gotten better, the mechanisms by which it has gotten better, and the ideal that Americans can live and belong together. In an effort to address racial strife, CRT exacerbates the problem by instating the identity of tribalism, which can create a generation that recognizes and identifies with tribalism. I oppose treating our children differently based on race. I oppose teaching white hate, shaming, and victimizing minorities. CRT allows our education system to perpetuate racism. Lowering standards and removing AP courses only victimizes minorities and makes them dependent. I believe America is great and all children can achieve. I want to end with a quote from President Ronald Reagan. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. This racist garbage disguised as diversity education is spreading across our country. We, the taxpayers who fund these schools, say no to CRT.
Thank you. And I don't think you read your address, so if I could just ask each person to do it, it's on here, so it's Susanna Tingley, 750 Hatchery Road, correct? Okay, thank you, sorry. Okay, next is Sue Warburton.
Hey, good evening. My name is Sue Warburton. I live at 1595 South Road in East Greenwich. I'm currently a teacher of students who speak other languages as well as English here at the high school. I've taught in the district for over 20 years. I've taught English language learners 2nd grade and 6th grade. I've been a technology educator, and I'm currently in my 5th year as the president of the Teachers Union here in North Kingstown. I have numerous experience on committees. I've won grants and awards, and I'm an accomplished educator, like so many others in North Kingstown. I tell you all of this tonight because last spring I applied to be on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee of the North Kingstown School Committee, and I thought I was a solid candidate for the committee. On April 27th, the school committee approved the members of the DEI subcommittee. On May 7th, I received an email notification from Mr. Lally, the director of HR, that I was not selected to be on the DEI committee. I later found out that over 50 people had applied, and only about 20% of the applicants were selected. I don't feel at all discriminated against by Jen Lima or anyone else that played a role in selecting the members. This recall notice that states she discriminated against the DEI applicants was absolutely not my experience. I trust the process that was followed by a group of people. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. I'm going to do them two at a time. Next is Catherine Pastore, followed by Siddharth Kapaka, and I apologize if I pronounce names incorrectly.
Hi, Catherine Pastor, 121 Suffolk Drive. I just want to reiterate my support for the work that the subcommittee is doing, the DEI subcommittee, and that the role that committee person Lima has played in keeping these issues at the forefront. It is exceedingly important that we do not limit the opportunities of kids, that we need to identify those things that might be limiting some kids and address those issues. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the next two will be Brian O'Dell and Rob Martone.
Hi, my name is Siddharth Kabaka. I live at 8 Ridgefield Court. I'm a former student here. So when my mother first told me about the petition to recall school committee member Lima, I was dumbstruck. Everything I'd read about the DEI subcommittee was positive in my eyes. I understand some people in NK believe there's no need for a discussion about diversity in our schools, that everything is fine and our students are on the right path. This is not the case. When I was a student in NK school system, no less than 5 years ago, I was consistently harassed, bullied, and made to feel like the other by my friends, other students, and even faculty. I don't blame the kids I grew up with. They weren't taught any better by their parents or by the school system. I was referred to as Indian boy, curry boy, dot head, starting in elementary school. People would make comments about how I'm a good Indian because I don't smell. In freshman year, on a school band trip to the Boston Pops, no less than 1 month after the Boston Marathon bombings, certain students made comments about how I was hiding a bomb in my trumpet case. I heard a stereotype from one of my teachers about how Indians are obsessed with wealth because we love to display gold. I heard jokes throughout high school about how I had an arranged marriage to another Indian girl in our class, an experience my other friends have also gone through. When other countries like India, in my example, were shown in educational media, it was usually without context or without data sources. Then I had to fend off questions about why there are so many rats and why no one has toilets, which are insulting misconceptions. It wasn't until I started 7th grade and my mom started presenting in Mrs. Mikulski's social studies class at Davisville about Indian culture that my peers even knew what our culture was and that it exists alongside everyone else. She still presents at that class every year, and the feedback she gets is enormous. The petition to recall committee member Lima is a statement saying that my experiences aren't valid, that the status quo in our school systems is perfectly fine, and it's okay if NK students are completely unprepared to enter a world that isn't 92% white. Because I assure you they're in for a rude awakening once they go off to college or into the workforce. I hope my statements convince you of the necessity of the DEI subcommittee, and I hope your efforts so far are the result of gross naivety and not blind ignorance. Thank you.
Next was Brian O'Dell.
Hello, my name is Rob Martone. I live at 7.
Oh, sorry, I had the wrong name. Did Brian O'Dell go? Sorry, I had him next. Do you mind? Sorry, just keep straight in my head here.
Brian O'Dell, 152 Salisbury Avenue. There is a group of us worried about what is happening in public schools. Recently, a California high school teacher was caught teaching communism, giving his students extra credit for participating in Antifa protests. A Los Angeles teachers union head said it doesn't matter that our kids know their math tables because they now know the difference between a riot and a protest. A high school in Washington state prohibited students from wearing red, white, and blue to a patriotic 9/11 tribute planned for Saturday football game. In other schools, even in Rhode Island, American flags are being removed from our classrooms. In other Rhode Island schools, the administration is deliberately removing parents from their child's decision to change their gender. They're actually lying to the parents. Providence is displaying Planned Parenthood posters in middle schools offering students as young as 10 years old $50 and a free year of services if they attend their sex education classes without parent consent. South Kingstown is currently reviewing a school hiring policy that calls for an illegal explicit racial quota. But those things are happening elsewhere, right? Not right here in North Kingstown. But we worry that they soon might come here. Similar things are happening in North Kingstown. For example, the last time I spoke here at a school committee meeting, the video of my speech, along with the videos of others opposed to the DEI subcommittee, mysteriously disappeared from the school committee website. Only our videos disappeared, no others. This wasn't the first time that this has happened. Got this time? After giving the anti-abortion presentation in government class, an NK high school student was ridiculed and then sent hate mail by fellow students and from other from others not even connected to the school. Conservative students feel their voices are being silenced. We also understand a controversial curriculum called Wit and Wisdom has been introduced into NK grades K through 5 at a cost of $250,000. Here are some of the themes woven into the stories. Murder in kindergarten, graphic sexual mating and gender fluidity in first grade, anti-police and anti-fire department in the second grade, graphic death, torture, and anti-church in the third grade, rape and adultery in the fourth grade, excessive violence, gore, alcoholism, and promiscuity in the fifth grade. And as I mentioned previously, there's a drug, alcohol, and vaping problem running rampant through the high school, even among NK athletes traveling on buses to away games. We're also worried that the school committee missed the deadline to submit its health and wellness plan to the state, which was required by law. We also believe you missed the deadline to submit your school improvement plan strategies to the state, which is also required by law, due September 1st. We also just learned tonight about this $450,000 of ESSER funds will be spent on 30 students. We're sharing some of the same concerns that some of your committee members share. But more than all of that, we're worried that despite spending more than any other nation, the United States education system has been falling by international standards by the past 3 decades. We are now far behind China. And among the states, Rhode Island ranks near the bottom of the quality education provided, number 41 in one of the rankings I saw. All while our neighbor states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Vermont all rank within the top 12 states. The question is, what can we do to raise the performance of all NK students in math, science, and language arts to world-class standards, not just Rhode Island standards? Shouldn't this be your single-minded focus? We worry that it isn't. Maybe you should start a subcommittee about academic excellence and conduct an audit about that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So the next is Brian O'Dell, Rob Martone, sorry. And then after that, I can't quite read the Tom Gabriel Black and Betsy Delaris. So sorry, Mr. Martone.
Thank you. So hi, my name is Rob Martone. I live at 73 Woodridge Drive. I'm not here to debate the validity of any group or subcommittee. However, I'm here to ask a couple of questions about the change that's being proposed to the charge for the DEI subcommittee. I did send an email to Dr. Auger and the entire school committee with my questions, and while I appreciate the dialogue, I was left with some unanswered questions. I am concerned about what looks to be a conflict of interest between Ms. Lima's tank organization and Ms. Lima's role as a voting member of the school committee. There's an item on the agenda tonight addressing the voting status of the school committee members on the DEI subcommittee, and I think this focus should really be on the voting status of the school committee members whose special interest group is urging the school committee to take certain actions. To step back, Tank has been very vocal with ideas that they would like the school committee to embark on. The DEI subcommittee has picked up on these ideas, including a possible equity survey that Tank is saying is needed because of the responses to an informal survey that was conducted by Tank. I'm not sure how many people participated in that survey, but I've heard, based on the last meeting, it was about 100 people. That does not seem to warrant the spending of $75,000 to $90,000 on a survey right now. My main concern is that Ms. Lima, who has been promoting this equity study through Tank, will be voting on the actual spend as a school committee member unless she chooses to rescind herself. And from what I understand from the emails that we exchanged, you do not consider this to be a conflict of interest. This leads me to an unanswered question. Why is Ms. Lima proposing the change to the voting status of the subcommittee members on the DEI committee? Is this a conflict? This suggests that perhaps Ms. Lima feels that this is a conflict somewhere. And I would argue that the conflict is at the school committee level, where the decisions are being made in spending the taxpayers' dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, sorry, you read it better than I did.
Yeah, Tom Gabriel Black.
So, yep, thank you.
Hi. Good evening. Sorry for my handwriting. I'll be better next time. So my name is Tom Gabriel Black. I live at 140 Burnt Cedar Drive, and I'm reading a statement on behalf of Jay Patel NKHS class of 2016 at 30 Southwest Ave in Jamestown. These are his words. All comments made by my friends and other students were never meant to personally attack my values and culture as a human. Nonetheless, they were still insensitive and were common. I am Indian, and yet I would receive remarks such as, "Don't bomb me," whenever I would get mad or annoyed at someone. These jokes stem from a lack of education, obviously, because of how false that statement is. Again, I never felt personally attacked because, A, I never understood how wrong a remark like that was at that age. B, I did not have the stamina to continually educate people on the insensitivity, and so I would laugh. And C, my friends would not have had the cultural understanding or education at that age to take what I would have said seriously. Being one of the few Indians in the school, it was tough relating to my friends that were primarily Caucasian, and to my own fault, I may have perpetuated these racist and insensitive jokes because I would laugh and play it off as something humorous. Cultural awareness and sensitivity was not taught in the curriculum, and in my opinion should definitely be introduced in not just the high school, but starting as early as in middle school. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Betsy Delaris, followed by Lori Duffy and Izzy Montini.
My name is Betsy Delaris. I live at 64 Ocean Avenue in North Kingstown. I wanted to acknowledge that I feel privileged to be in a community that has the leadership of the caliber sitting before us. We're fortunate to live in a community where our leaders are committed to encouraging and allowing each student to reach their potential. I'm grateful for those elected leaders who have advanced that goal. I appreciate that you are explicitly creating a climate to prepare students to be not just citizens of North Kingstown, but to be citizens, productive, engaged citizens of the 21st century, with all of the challenges and changes it presents for all of us. It would be nice if things were simpler, but that is not the world that our students are entering. I would particularly like to thank you for your establishment of your DEI Advisory Subcommittee. In the heat of the current media stirring the pot, it seems to be challenging for opponents to recall what equity is. It is justice and fairness. I look forward to an enlightened community standing wholeheartedly behind fairness and equity for our young people. Again, my thanks to you all for your leadership, and I would single out Jennifer Lima for being a leader within this community, and the rest of you supporting that goal of fairness and equity for all of our children. Thank you.
Next is Lori Duffy.
Hi, Lori Duffy, 88 Haverhill Avenue. I'm also a clinical social worker and wanted to thank Dr. Carson for the work that you're doing. I see this and deal with this every day. I want to thank the members of the school committee for all the work that you're doing, especially now with the conflict, misinformation, and the pressure that you're under. I'm guessing when someone said, hey, you should run for school committee, you thought, well, what's a couple extra meetings and some reading? What could be the harm? What could go wrong? But given the pandemic and the nationwide movement to increase DEI in educational settings, really no one could have forecasted what was going to happen. Public service can be a thankless job. After all, no matter what you do, someone's not going to be happy with you, and some of that's to be expected. But what isn't expected, I feel, is when town council members, such as Mary Breimer, publicly calls the entire school committee tone deaf, insinuating that you're not doing your jobs. And I think what actually is tone deaf would be walking away, allowing the rights of our LGBTQ students to be limited, and blocking the teaching of the truth in our classes. Thus far, I see the school committee as tackling really hard issues and not succumbing to the adult bullying, propaganda that is circling through our community. I'm asking each of you to keep standing strong. Think every day, am I doing the best that I can for our young people? I'm grateful for how each of you have composed yourself through all of this, but I would ask to see a little more individual support for the work that's being done. Don't let the bullies scare you. Don't succumb to foolish thinking. But please step up, speak up, support the work that you all agreed to do. I'm asking you to dig deep and find courage. I was recently working with a young child, and she loses her voice when she gets anxious and she kind of shuts down, and we were looking for quotes for her to write in her notebook to feel strong and powerful, and I wanted to share hers with you, and perhaps it might help you this year. You can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but we can't have both at the same time. I also want to thank the DEI subcommittee. You've been the target of such lies and have placed yourself in the line of fire for what? There's no personal benefit for you. I believe that you want all young people to feel safe and heard, want all students to feel part of the community, and understand there's a much bigger world outside of North Kingstown that you should want to be part of. I know the subcommittee has made no recommendations about curriculum, but I hope that one day they do. We can always do better. Thank you for the sacrifices you're all making to be part of these committees.
Thank you. Next is Izzy Montini.
Hi, my name is Izzy Montini, 70 Bethany Lane, North Kingstown. A disagreement on policy is not grounds for a recall. Jennifer Lima was the highest vote getter of any local official elected. She has done exactly what she promised she would do. She is working to provide students with a safe space to feel accepted, for inequities they experience to be looked at and solved, such as lower chances of graduation rates. She is advocating for student voice and continues to meet with students to show she cares about youth in our town and values their voice. I think a key word here is value. Sure, many of you are listening to me speak, but don't value my voice because I'm not an adult, or I'm not a teacher, or I haven't been to college yet. These things are all out of my control. So if you do not value my voice, I'm asking you to respect it and maybe listen with an open mind. I'm not here to change anyone's minds, but rather further explain some of the misinformation going around. Recalling Jen Lima is pointless. Even if she was pushing the most radical agenda, which she is absolutely not, everything the school committee has voted on so far, with the exception of amending a mask mandate at recess, was unanimous. Are you going to recall every single member up there? Ms. Lima herself cannot do anything without the approval of the majority on the board. So it seems as though she is being used as a scapegoat because she advocates for issues that may be uncomfortable. I'm sure everyone has heard the phrase, ignorance is bliss. Sure, it's bliss, but it also solves nothing. While the DEI subcommittee is working to acknowledge and solve issues and inequities, many are pushing for the DEI subcommittee to not exist. If these inequities are not looked at, they don't exist, and that is a world in which ignorance is bliss. And that right there is privilege. Look around the room. White, wealthy students at our high school have a high graduation rate, a high rate of going to college, a high rate of taking AP classes. So why should the issues of DEI matter to you? It all comes down to empathy in the hopes of making our community a better place and more equitable for those who are struggling. I'm sure there are people slowly picking apart my argument right now, so why not have a meeting with me? Jen Lima has. Jen and I do not see eye to eye on some issues, but she has always valued student voice. She has met with students without hesitation. After we reached out to the people recalling her 3 separate times, I did not get anywhere with getting a meeting set up, which shows that student voice, or at least students who think differently than them, are not valued or respected. You are my community members. I go to school and am friends with your children, yet we are not given the time of day after reaching across the aisle in hopes of coming to a solution. You say that Jen Lima is the one dividing us, but I beg to differ. Many of you in this audience are attacking Jen on social media, but have you reached out to meet with her? Have you given her respect as an elected official? I want to come together, not apart, but coming together and working together is a two-way street. Things will be a lot more difficult in our small town if we continue to be so hostile and do not value each other's voices. It all comes down to value and respect. No one wants to talk to each other about anything anymore. All that we see is hostility on Facebook pages. I believe if people have legitimate concerns, they will reach out in hopes of having an actual discussion where middle ground and progress can be made. Why can we no longer come together and do that? With that, we will get a lot further than where we currently are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mary Lopresti, Allison Murray, and Patricia Rogers.
My name is Mary Lopresti, and I reside at 29 Chestnut Road. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to have my input included in the discussion of the DEI committee. I am the mother of 5 children, all of whom have attended North Kingstown schools at one time or another, and currently I have a child with special needs at Davisville Middle School and a child who is black at the high school. Over the years, I have advocated for my children in various ways, whether it be attending a school committee meeting to discuss appropriate playground surfacing for students who use a wheelchair, requesting that a handicapped accessible chair swing be installed on a school playground, or providing opportunities to connect with other multiracial families that look similar to ours. I have prioritized my children's unique needs in a town where they might not regularly see their skin color or physical characteristics reflected in the larger population. As you might expect, I was very pleased to learn that North Kingstown was going to be forming a DEI subcommittee. In fact, I applied to be a member. While I was not selected, I strongly approve of its mission, which was expressed in Dr. Auger's email invitation to apply. These were his words, quote, "The North Kingstown School Department believes that all students and staff deserve a respectful and inclusive environment. The North Kingstown School Committee supports these principles and wishes to examine how race, ethnicity, language, disability, religion, age, gender, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, country of ancestral origin, interrupted education status, military status, or any other category protected by law affect and influence district-wide practices," end quote. I have a difficult time understanding why anyone would object to this charge. I've been encouraged by the recent efforts toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in North Kingstown, and believe that our community can only be further strengthened and sustained by the work of a larger circle of people who have direct experiences with challenges rooted in racism and ableism. When we see our stories reflected in and affirmed by others who have a vital stake in our success in the classroom and beyond, we have the freedom to explore and become our true selves. As I've recently got to know a little bit about Jen Lima and what is important to her, I have been impressed by her openness and willingness to hear my story. She is trying to make our school community more inclusive and of greater educational value for all of the children of North Kingstown. Why anyone would consider recalling Jen from her position perplexes me and makes me wonder where these motivations are coming from. I urge the school committee to stay the course and not be sidetracked by the misinformation, fear, and unwarranted negativity that we are subjected to. I would also I'd like to add this.
I'd have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, I will, quickly. And I just added this at the end, and I had to share this. I feel honored to follow Izzy Montini, whom my daughter referred to as, quote, "the nicest, kindest person in my class." And that was 13 years ago in preschool. And I hope she continues to share that voice.
I do have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and a special thank you to Jen and all those who are serving on the committee.
Thank you. Next is Patricia Rogers. I may be off one. It's Allison Murray just went. Patricia Rogers is next. Oh, I'm sorry. I crossed off someone that. My apologies.
Hello, I'm Allison Murray. I live at 212 Fieldstone Lane in the Saunderstown section of North Kingstown. And I'm here to support Jennifer Lima and the DEI work. But before that, as a parent and an educator and an academic, I would like to point out that there was some commentary before about the amount of money spent for what supposedly only affected maybe 30 students. And in reference to that, I want to point out that if you have a student in class with unresolved mental health issues, it affects the whole class and sometimes the entire student body, and it can affect a class every single day, and it also affects teacher mental health, believe me. I'm here to support Jen Lima. I have done a lot of diversity work for various organizations in Rhode Island, and I'm currently doing some of that work. I also applied for the diversity committee and received a rejection, and I'm fine with that. There were a lot of great candidates that applied. I want to point out that the mission of this committee has been very clear from the beginning to look at the educational policies, not just reflecting how we treat people of color, but also issues of students with disabilities and illnesses and gender. And as educators, we are taught to be very reflective. And, the pinnacle of good parenthood and a good educator is to develop students who are reflective and think critically. And self-evaluation is part of that critical, reflective thinking. And institutional evaluation is too. Okay, that critical thinking is always making sure you are on track and double-checking. And just to throw in some anecdotal evidence that actually occurred at North Kingstown High School, or at least some more. My son is a senior at North Kingstown High School, and his AP Computer Science class has 3 female students, 2 or 3, he wasn't sure. And when I asked him about the breakup in his engineering class, he was like, "Mom, it's engineering. Of course it's all boys." And so right there might be an area that would be wonderful for the diversity committee to do some reflection on. Okay, my son was unfortunate enough to go to summer school this summer because he was one of those students that didn't like virtual learning. And he came home and he said, "Mom, the students in summer school, it was much more diverse than, the typical school day during the year." Another area that committee might reflect on. So there are
I'd have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Definite places that we can do some reflection to see if we have any equity issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Next, I have Patricia Rogers, followed by Karen Kuzminski and Thor Johnson.
Hi, Patricia Rogers, 29 Cambridge Court, North Kingstown. First, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a friend of the Lima family. I voted for Jen. I take the education of the children in this town very seriously, and she earned that vote with her platform, not our friendship. Whether or not Jen Lima, in her official capacity as school committee member, advocates for CRT, and I still think we all need to agree on what that means because I haven't heard of one definition, the reality is that a single member of the school committee cannot possibly dictate and force curriculum on the district by themselves. That is not how it works. The facts, the process, the rules are public, and they're there for all to read and understand. And yet the signs and the battle cry of the pro-recall group are "Stop CRT in our schools, recall Lima," as if to say if she's not removed, she can make this happen. I've not heard this committee make an official statement on how curriculum changes are proposed and approved, but perhaps you might want to consider that, as it seems to be causing a lot of confusion around people that don't keep up on these issues and just see these signs. Jen can speak for herself on her positions, but I will say this. Jen has never, not only in her official capacity, but in the years I've known her, backed down from a statement she's made. She's tried to clarify, but removed, deleted, retracted. No. People that know her know that that's not Jen. So this idea that she has all this CRT, anti-police, or insert today's falsehood here propaganda on her page and then retracting it later is total nonsense. There's no proof of it, yet some people believe it anyway. It's difficult for me to understand how some are so willing to believe things for which there's no evidence of fact, to jump on the hate train with these beliefs and then refuse to believe basic truths like racism does exist in this town. When some tell you, like I do, that we've seen it ourselves, but you say you haven't seen any evidence. How is it that some things require evidence for you to believe, but other things you're very quickly to believe with no evidence whatsoever, or even evidence to the contrary? I simply don't understand it. The motivation behind the insults, the hatred, and bordering slander, in my opinion, that have been hurled at Jen, it's scary to contemplate the reason behind it. I know what I think it is, and I'm praying that I'm wrong. The hate's pretty intense, and it's not just directed at Jen. And I'm going to tell you for a minute about an experience I had this weekend. Because I have just been mortified by what I've seen, I, for the first time in my life, picked up a sign and walked to the post office. My sign said, please, please don't sign this recall. See me for the facts. I stood there in silence for 90 minutes, short of a couple interchanges when I was called names and told to go home by a few recall supporters. At the end of that, I did walk over, and there was probably about a 2-minute, I would say somewhat heated exchange where I said I wanted to respectfully explain my reasons for being there because it wasn't about CRT. I was yelled at. Did I raise my voice in return? Absolutely. I said nothing disrespectful. I was, however, called names, told I didn't know how democracy worked, told to go home and do my research, told that I must have nothing better to do on a Saturday. And when I said, you don't know me or anything about me, the response was, we don't care about you, which is exactly what you want to hear from a group of people that includes an elected town councilwoman. This is what we have to fix here. I felt like I wasn't being included in things that day either. We have to stop.
I do have to ask you to
other.
wrap up, please.
Let's please stop this recall, work together, figure out how to make this town a better place for our kids, and teach our kids to respect each other like we're not doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, I think it's Karen Kuzminski.
Hi, I'm Karen Kuzminski. I live at 22 Matola Drive. I'm a mother of 2 boys. And I've been in this community a couple of years, and I just want to say I think it's a really special community. I'm a single mom, and when I arrived, there's a lot of help with caring for each other's kids, pets, aging adults, aging parents. And it's just been really disheartening, I think, to feel the energy as this pandemic has happened with the division. I feel like, we're divided by our opinions, which I think that nobody should be shamed for having a different opinion. As a parent, I don't think there should be shaming over how we feel about masking or not masking our kids. So I came actually to talk about masks, so I think that's contributing to our mental health. Our mental health, as well as our kids, especially our mental health. So I think that I would like that to be a continuing conversation. How is that contributing? I mean, we're spending a whole lot of money, it sounds like, on mental health, and I don't know that we're getting to the root of it. If we're still separating kids and we're still masking them, ironically, I stand having a voice wearing a mask. It's kind of silly. But I also want to address what's in the room tonight with this CRT. I didn't come here to talk about it, but I have a personal story. My son, our neighbors were lovely people. His skin was as black as can be, and she was as fair as can be. And my son was best friends since the age of 3 with this little boy. And it wasn't until he was 8 or 9 where somebody pointed out that his mom and his best friend's mom and dad had 2 different skin colors, and he was surprised. He never noticed. So I kind of wonder, are we keeping this old energy going? I don't say racism doesn't exist, but I don't think it is more important a topic than mental health and some of the other things that we're dealing with in the school systems. I think that drugs and vaping and anxiety and depression are very, very strong topics, and I just wonder if we're keeping an old energy going. And I just hate to see this divide continue because we have differing opinions. I would like to see more compassion, more understanding. I would just like to see us unify and maybe problem solve creatively instead of attacking. I don't even go to the social media page for North Kingstown because it's just so terrible. The energies, everybody's vilifying
Do
one
have to
another.
ask you to wrap up, please.
So anyway, I just want to say I would like to feel the way I felt when I moved here with everybody being more unified and not so opinionated and not so lacking in compassion for one another's opinions.
I do have to ask you to please wrap up. Thanks. Okay, next is Thor Johnson. I have to apologize. I've somehow completely messed up my timer, so I'm going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. But Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Thor Johnson. I live at 32 Stillman Road in Saunderstown. Raised two girls here. They both went through the NK system. But I was neither born nor raised in Rhode Island. And I've lived abroad most of my career, spent 3 of the last 4 years outside of the United States, and I choose to live in Rhode Island. One of the reasons I choose to live in Rhode Island is the community. And I think this effort to unseat a sitting elected volunteer official divides our community and pits neighbor against neighbor. It's affecting my friendships, it's affecting my own neighborhood, and I think it's petty trying to unseat a Democrat so that there's a chance a Republican can come into a volunteer committee. So I look at these things and feel it diminishes us all. Academia, a national trend is inclusiveness and diversity. It's everywhere. Academia has long supported diversity and inclusiveness because it's the right thing to do. Business supports inclusiveness and diversity because it's good business. And so I feel like we're diminishing ourselves with this recall effort and having a debate about something which is really already a trend in North America and something we should all embrace, and I would love to see us move forward on that. So I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ramona Bessinger, followed by Natalie O'Neill. And that's the end of the list I have.
Hello, my name is Ramona Bessinger. I live at 437 Davitt Avenue in Jamestown. I'm listening to all the comments tonight. I don't really have anything prepared, but I do want to comment and share something. Today I had the opportunity to sit on a panel with Ibram X. Kendi and discuss the very issues that we're talking about tonight. And what I realized was that a big part of the problem currently is not that we are bigots, as you so kindly refer to us, bigots and, I don't know, there were some other names that you called us, but that our understanding is very diverse in itself. I teach in the inner city. I am an immigrant as well to this country. I have a very diverse background, and I have a very different perspective on this entire subject. Today's panel discussion confirmed for me that Ibram X. Kendi also, has a very different view on what it means what critical race theory actually means. He does not believe that it's in the schools, and you know what? He's right. It's not. What we do have in the schools is a push for a race-based curriculum. And that race-based curriculum is divisive. It's promoting racial hostility. From my experience, I am not saying that racism does not exist. So please do not judge me for being up here and voicing my opinion, because I can hear it already. Racism does exist. But I will say that as a teacher of 22 years, and having taught in countries outside the United States, and having a perspective as a person who did not grow up in the United States, I can say that the curriculum that I've been honored and very fortunate to teach is diverse. I don't know that I have ever met a teacher that was racist or judgmental or mean-spirited. And if they were that, then they were promptly removed from their job, or the students ferreted them out. But what I would like to say is that the books that are part of these curriculum platforms that are being offered to the school, or not offered, they're being mandated to the school, because you're not going to get those ESSER funds if you don't purchase the curriculums, right? We know that. We also know that there's a lot of stigma attached to change the reading material in the curriculum. And I think that's problematic because I think this is a great country. I think that it's an honor to be an American. Is everything perfect? No. Everything is not perfect. Can we do better always? Yes. However, these curriculum packages, Wit and Wisdom, I know I teach these, I'm teaching from that curriculum package myself. They're not what you think they are. They are not filled with racial tolerance.
I do
they are
need to ask
not
you to please
diverse,
wrap up.
equitable, or inclusive. So, just to speak to Izzy's comment, I would love to have a conversation with Jen Lima. She has removed every single one of my comments on her Tank Facebook page.
I do ask you to please
reasonable
wrap up.
comments. So I don't think she's so open to discussion or debate. But I had a great debate today with Kendi and would definitely love to have a debate with you anytime. And Izzy.
Thank you. And last is Natalie O'Neill.
Yes, hi. I'm Natalie O'Neill at 25 Arnold Ave in North Kingstown. I am an educator, and I am a parent, and I'm appalled. First of all, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How is that negative? I don't understand. I can't, I'm baffled. Secondly, it is a subcommittee. It is not a subcommittee that has changed any curriculum. It's in support of inclusion. It's trying to find ways. So a lot of this BS about rape and talking to kindergartners about hating the police, that's baloney. I mean, why say things like that? Like, who does that? I'm a teacher. You think I sit a fourth grader down and talk to her about rape? Come on. I'm sorry. That was just really got to me. And, you know, you teach your children to be kind to one another and not bully. And I'm looking on some of these Facebook pages, and the way these people talk and the way they bash Jen, it's outrageous. Do you want your children to grow up and treat others like that? Clearly. I mean, it's just wrong. I mean, Jen is one person, and she's one person trying to do good. And as other people have said, she can't do it by herself. She's not on a committee changing everything all by herself. Other people have to approve. So it's a group effort up here, you know, and you have people with different views working together, and that's the way it should be. So I'm in support of Jen, and I'm just baffled at a lot of this, and I just felt I had to come out here and say that. So.
Thank you. That's the last person I have signed up. Oh, okay. Sure. You to write your name and address, please.
Shorter person. Hi there. My name is Kim Lanaway. I live at 47 Sylvan Court. And I want to talk a little bit about masks tonight. I feel like we are living in like the strangest of times. It used to be that we turned on the news and we would see what happened today. But it feels like more and more the news is focused on what might happen tomorrow, what might happen a month from now, how many cases we might have in January. And it's craziness. And I feel like we're making COVID policy based on what might happen. Here's some data. Since the pandemic started, 0.001%, so move that decimal over another couple places, of deaths in the country have been in the 0 to 17-year-old age range. 78% are over age 65. Of all cases, only 1.6% resulted in death. Of those, only 6% were COVID only. 94% of the deaths in this country had at least 3 comorbidities. In May of last year, the governor, McKee, lifted all restrictions in Rhode Island. On that day, we had 403 cases. Today, we had 389 cases. Obviously, our vaccination rates are in vastly different places as well. Last year, the magic metric that everybody talked about, Governor Raimondo and then McKee, was the positivity rate. Remember, if we traveled to a state that had more than 5%, we had to quarantine. Today's positivity rate was 3.4%. The metric being watched these days is the transmission rate. I don't know why it changed or when it changed. 10 to 50 cases is considered low, 50 to 99 is considered moderate, and over 100 in the state is considered high. Today in North Kingstown, our positivity rate, that metric is gone. The transmission rate in North Kingstown is 10.2 per 100,000 cases. Dr. Auger and Greg, you said that you would reevaluate the mask policy based on...
That's not true.
Well, I went there today. Based on transmission rates, you said you would reevaluate the mask policy. I'm asking you to reevaluate the mask policy. Unmask our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda. You didn't sign up, sir. I guess you got to go last. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. McGuinn, is there a reason you always want to go last? Why can't you sign up like everybody else at the beginning? Just curious.
You have the floor, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That was a very important question. Okay. First of all, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
I need you to name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, sorry. Just like everybody else, and then I'll start the
clock. It was
clock.
already identified by the superintendent, so I'm sorry. Jim McGuinn, 412 Chimney Rock Drive.
Thank you.
Okay. Got that? Can I start now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We wouldn't be having this discussion if there wasn't a recall. And, the recall is a democratic process. It's not a personal attack on anyone. It's a democratic process. It was voted in by our members of this community. And in fact, by Republicans about 10 years ago, it was double. It's a very high standard. We are 3 times as many people have to sign a petition to get a recall in North Kingston as in California. Okay? It's not an easy bar. But the good thing is, we are having the discussion right now. Now, people differ on, you said yourself, and a group of us did meet with Mr. Blasberg, correct? And we did discuss this. People differ on the issue. When you go to a DEI meeting, there's no comment. You sit there and you listen to white privilege, you listen to colorblindness. You're not listening to the diversity of people from India, people from Pakistan, people from all over the world, because there isn't just white, I'm sorry. There isn't just brown. When you travel the world, there's people from all different countries. And within a country, there's racism all over the world, by the way. There's slavery all over the world right now. There's slavery in America right now. There's people who are being oppressed right now in Afghanistan. Women are being beaten with hoses right now, okay? Our kids need to understand the world, and they need to understand the different cultures. And my issue is, and it's always been with Dr. Auger, it's been our kids, and particularly the kids at the lower levels, how proficient they are in math, reading, and writing. We have a problem in this town. And the problem in this town is, particularly with boys, it's particularly at lower socioeconomic levels, and it's been a problem between Wickford Middle School and Davisville Middle School. I think there's a 40% gap there. We're not addressing it. We have a wellness committee. Our wellness committee is required under the GBGC school committee policy. District recognizes that schools are also sharing the responsibility to prepare students for life, which includes teaching, modeling the skills and behaviors necessary for lifelong health and wellness. Do you know they're not even meeting? Do you know that Rhode Island General Law 1621-28 requires reporting that's not being done? Did you know that? Did you know that the kids are in Wickford Middle with the windows open? I'm on asset management. It was said at a meeting in August that there was no money.
I'd ask you to wrap up, sir.
I have advocated for money for these schools for kids for years. Okay, it's on record. You don't ask for enough to maintain these schools.
Please.
I push for a bond.
Mr. McGuinn, I need you to please wrap up.
You got $13 million. You just started a study on the HVAC at Wickford Middle.
Mr. McGuinn.
2 years, the kids are with open windows. Health and wellness. Look at that. Ms. Lima, you're on that committee. Can you have that committee meet and fill in their reports to the state?
I have to ask you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. So next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. O'Shea.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. So, I just wanted to point out before I get into the heart of my comments that one item thrown out there, the transmission rate today on the Department of Health website is 236. It was reported earlier. The number is 12. Okay, in North Kingstown, in the previous week, the latest data we have that ends the week of 9/4, the number in North Kingstown is 202. And that's higher than the number for Rhode Island for that week, which was 181. Okay, so that's right off this page. You can look at it yourself. So I'd like to point out that, believe it or not, everyone, our school department does a heck of a lot of work that has nothing to do with whether it is critical race theory or wearing of masks. And recently we had the opening of school. Things went very well, in my opinion. We have a ton of wonderful teachers and support staff and administrators and bus drivers that are really going the extra distance for us right now to make our schools welcoming and, yes, perform excellently. And we have an excellent reputation for that. We had Mia Thompson as the Teacher of the Year and Sue Tavares as ESP of the Year. That was announced earlier, and I sent an email out, but it's worth mentioning here tonight. They are both incredible educators, both inspiring people, and they are exemplary of what, our staff is all about and what they are doing for your kids. And I think it's important that all of us keep our eyes on that. We have a truly exemplary school system. We win, a lot of accolades for nationally recognized, and those are continuing to come. And, I just want the focus to be there and not stuff that's made up and conspiracy theories and I also, thank you. I also want to point out that one thing that is nagging is, and I know that, I've talked with a number of people in the community about this, and that is the idea that, we're still going to school in a pandemic. It is vitally important that we are vaccinated, that when we have the opportunity that we get our kids vaccinated. It is so important. And right now, for instance, we have some rules from the Department of Health, and we're going to follow them, about quarantining when someone is sitting next to a student who is identified as positive for COVID. Now, in a classroom, in some cases, those rules are, helpful if you're wearing a mask, if you're distancing, if there are other mitigation measures in the room, and those have been pretty good. On buses, not so good, because more students are taking buses now. so more students are in that tight area. I'm hoping that some of that rule will be a little bit relaxed because there are mitigation measures there too. Bus windows are open, students are wearing masks, and if you know anything about buses, they have pretty high seats for those elementary kids too, so they're pretty kind of contained in their own bubble between those seats. But that's not for me. That's for the Department of Health to determine, and we're going to work with them and, continue forward. But, what concerns me is that one student on a bus who happens to be positive could mean another dozen have to stay home for a week because of quarantining. We're going to do everything we can to reach out to them to make sure they're keeping up. But it is something that's nagging us a little bit. More so at the elementary level than the middle and high because elementary students are not vaccinated yet. A lot of our middle and high school students are, and that's helping. So I just want you to know that that is on my mind, and it's something that we continue to work on. And so that's where I am right now. Thank you, Mr. Blasball. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have routine items. So first, I'd ask. First, I could say that I can disclose that we did not take any votes in our executive session this evening, and ask for a motion to seal the executive session minutes of September 14th, 2021. I'll give that one to Mr. Mather, and a second from Ms. Lima. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. On the consent agenda, we already approved item D2. So does anyone have anything else that they would like to exempt from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Hildebrand, second from Mr. Mather. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, we have item 5, which is the approval of the Quonset lease extension. Ms. King, could you just speak briefly to that?
Yes. So according to our lease for 100 Romano Vineyard Way, administrative offices, we need to notify the landlord by September 30th of our decision to extend for another 2-year option in the for the lease, and that would start April 1st, 2022, and would go until March 31st, 2024. So you'd be approving just that 2-year, and we would have to come back to you for another possible 2-year extension after that.
Okay, if I could get a motion to approve item 5. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. So next we have school committee approval of a revised charge for the DEI special subcommittee. So to start the discussion, I'd ask if we could get a motion to approve item 6.1. I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, second from Mr. Mather. Okay, so a couple things here. Anyone want to lead off the discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Mather.
I just want to reiterate a point that I think is pretty important, that this DEI subcommittee is not Jen Lima's subcommittee. This was a subcommittee that was voted on and unanimously approved by every single member of the board sitting up here. And we continue to stand behind it. I thought it was obvious, but I've been seeing completely unacceptable personal attacks on Jen in the last couple of weeks, and I can't imagine what she's going through. I can assure you that every single member of the school committee is passionate, and we're committed to our jobs, and that's exactly what we see in Jen Lima right now. We're passionate about the work that the citizens of this town elected us to do. Jen's courage and your dedication and your advocacy is inspiring, and I'm so proud to be sitting right next to you.
I think this goes to the vice chair.
I guess so. I didn't even
Congratulations, you've been
There.
promoted.
I was so enthralled with what Jake was saying, I didn't even realize he wasn't there anymore.
You thought I was going to ramble on?
He did. Yeah, other comments, other points that we want to talk about?
No, I would like to reiterate what Jake said, that we voted on this committee as a committee, and we all voted unanimously to support the work of diversity in our schools and bringing any issues or things to light. So we as a committee support the formation and the work that this committee, it's an advisory committee. They don't spend North Kingstown's money. They meet, they come up with ideas and suggestions, and they have to bring it to our committee. Nothing has come to our committee yet from their committee to approve or not approve. And at that point in time, we will have those discussions on whatever it is that comes to our committee. But they are an advisory committee that we as a committee supported. Thanks, Jen.
I think Mr. Mather and Ms. Hoskins covered it very well. I did also want to point out that this is not new to the North Kingstown School Department, and it's, Jen is very much an advocate, but the mission and vision of our school department existed prior to Jen coming onto the school committee, and it will exist after Jen is no longer here, too. It's not something that's specific just to her. It's something that we should all of us, all of our kids, our teachers, our support staff, and everybody here on the stage should support. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not unique to a school department either. Somebody earlier today made it a point that it's in businesses, it's in higher ed, it's in all of the work that we are all doing or should be. In my own career, we're taking anti-racist trainings. We're talking about it in our staff and in the families that we support. Everybody across the globe is talking about this. This is not just North Kingstown School Committee. And so to single out one individual and blame her doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you. So those that know me know I'm not one who often doesn't have a lot to say about something, and this isn't going to be any exception, so I apologize. I actually cut half of what I'm about to say out of this. One thing I want to say is, at a time that we're approving modifications to our DEI advisory subcommittee, I think it's important to take a step back about why I personally supported the committee to begin with. And first, I want to talk about the charge of the committee itself. The school committee set out areas that it wants the DEI subcommittee to examine with respect to the district practices. There are 13 categories listed, plus a catch-all about, quote, any other category protected by law. Race is one of those 13. But somehow, at least among those who are opposing the work of the subcommittee, it has become all-consuming. I have heard commentary asking why the DEI subcommittee is not looking at this issue or that issue, but the subcommittee has met only 3 times. They have much work to do, but they can't examine all 13 areas in 3 meetings. I did cut out a lot of it. But again, I'm very disturbed about the focus on race when the subcommittee has much more to talk about. The work of this subcommittee is about tolerance and understanding, not race. Students can be intolerant, consciously and unconsciously, without being racist. Now, I want to back up for a second. I'm a little disappointed that some of the people I really am speaking to aren't here right now. I know people. I interact with them. I get emails. I know faces. I'm a little disappointed, so hopefully they'll watch the tape. And with respect to that, since we're talking about a tape, I want to address something also that was mentioned, which is we have had some technical problems with the taping of our meetings. Yes, there was a meeting where a portion of citizens' comments was dropped out. It was back up within 12 hours, I believe. The entire meeting, to the best of my knowledge, is available to watch now. It is not a grand conspiracy. As a result of that problem, we now run 2 cameras streaming to 2 different places. That's not something we would do if we're really trying to not have somebody's voice be heard. I'm very committed to treating everyone the same and giving everyone the opportunity to speak. So, sorry, I'm going to go back here for a second. So, I was on the work of the subcommittees about tolerance and understanding and not race. They can be intolerant consciously and unconsciously without being racist. I had a long discussion about these issues with an old friend of mine who shared an experience from his own childhood that frames this to me perfectly. He happens to be Armenian. By his own and my own observation, he would not say that he is black or even brown. He has no accent. But in elementary school, he would sit down at lunch and open the lunch his mother had packed him, only to hear his fellow students say, "Ew, what the heck is that? What are you eating? That smells awful." He felt ashamed and different. Were those students racist? No. Were they hurtful? Yes. Can a part of the social emotional learning in schools involve teaching students that they should recognize, embrace that there are their own colleagues and their colleagues' differences? Absolutely. Is that CRT? I don't think so. But if you do, and you believe that children should be disrespecting those around them or making them feel uncomfortable because they are different in any way, for any reason, then we're not going to agree about much. I hate to focus on racism because, as I mentioned, that's not even the focus of this subcommittee. But since the commentary from those opposed to the committee's work focuses so much about it, I feel I have to address it anyway. I have heard from many in emails and at the microphone people saying things like, we don't have a race problem in North Kingstown, we're not a racist town. There's only been one incident of racism in our schools, which is not true, by the way, but it's generally impossible for the school department to share student disciplinary information. Where's the data showing the number of racist incidents? This all misses the point. Let's start with numbers. For me, there's not an acceptable amount of racism that could be quantified by any data. Whether the number of racist incidents are 1 or 100 or somewhere in between, that is too many. Second of all, saying that we can do better to deal with racism in our town does not mean that our town is racist. Doing better does not mean we've been doing it wrong. Not to pick on Joan Beisel here, but many of you know her daughter Elizabeth. Many times in her training, Elizabeth swam a personal best in a race, but she knew she could do better. Did that mean she did it wrong before? Of course not. Our school department can be excellent and still strive to do better, and that's what this subcommittee is about. It's not about race, it's about people, and making sure that we are meeting the needs of those people, however they come, and with whatever makes them special, as best as we can. And that's why I continue to support the fact that we founded this committee and the work that it does. It's not about one person. It's about what we need to do. And that's my 2 cents on this. Yes.
Thank you. I also want to thank all of the committee for your support for the subcommittee and for this very important work. And, you know, it takes a lot of courage to do this. It obviously can be a divisive item. One point I just want to make, it came up a couple of times tonight that my involvement, and Dr. Mansiri as well, in a group with fellow superintendents to discuss these matters with some support is somehow a bad thing. I think it's important that we all have professional development in our careers. I'm dedicated to it, and we are dedicated to it as a school system, and that applies to superintendents as well. This is an important initiative. I want to make sure in my leadership that I'm helping to get it right. It's very easy in these delicate conversations, for instance, to be, misunderstood, say the wrong thing. I don't want to do that. I want to lead this in the right direction so that it's producing something that is very productive for our district. So yes, I'm going to sign up for the professional development. It's not a conspiracy. It's not something awful. It's something that's good. So I'm fully on board. I appreciate the work Ms. Lima is doing and her courage and pushing us to take this on in a more direct way. As people have mentioned, this work is not the first time the word diversity has been mentioned in a school department, everybody, or equity or inclusion. These have been parts of our strategic plans for decades, long before any of us got here. Okay? But if you look at the recent events in our nation, a lot of people are waking up. And they're looking at these events and saying, how can that exist in the United States of America? And what have we been doing about it? So if it takes those kinds of events to wake us up a little bit and to start having these conversations, I'm all in. And I want to do that in a respectful way, and I want to get it right. So we're going to join the conversation. It's nationwide. We're not the only district. The reason I'm in a group with every other district in South County, because every other district in South County is taking this on. They also see this as important. I don't know why we wouldn't. Thank you.
No problem. So, Ms. Lima.
Thank you. So I'd like to speak for a minute if I could. I'd like to thank you guys, the rest of the school committee, for your renewed commitment to the DEI subcommittee and to its charge. And I also do want to take this opportunity to speak publicly on a few matters for the record, since I can. Regardless of why you're all here, and like Greg alluded to, there's a lot less of you right now, unfortunately. But it's great to see so many people who are engaged in what's happening in our schools over the past few months. You know, I encourage everybody to pay attention and to remain dialed in. Local government is important, and we need community members who want to be involved. You know, I'm not going to go into a comprehensive report. There isn't enough time for me tonight to address all the misinformation that's circulating. You know, people alluded tonight to the outright lies, the statements attributed to me that have been distorted or taken out of context. But I do want to say, if I leave something out tonight that you're wondering about, I urge you to contact me instead of relying on what you hear on social media or through a third party. The best way to get accurate information about what's happening is direct from the source. All our school committee meetings are streamed online, and the minutes are available a few weeks later. Our DEI meetings, while not videotaped, are open to the public, and the minutes from that are made available as well. I have a campaign Facebook page where I post relevant information, and my contact information is listed there and on the NKSD website. I can be reached at any time with questions for clarification or if you just want to get some more information. You know, I ran on an anti-racism platform. My palm card said our classrooms need to be a place where being anti-racist is actively taught and is an expected part of the learning culture. As I said when I was campaigning, I believe that the NK schools are good, but that there are areas where we can do better. DEI is one of those areas. The creation of this subcommittee, which was done by a unanimous vote, was at my request, and I am very proud of that. It's not the final step, though, and it's also not intended to be the cure for every problem that exists within the school department. You know, I would encourage those who think that we're focusing our efforts in the wrong areas to A, allow us the time and space to actually get some work done versus having to justify our existence. B, work with the entire school committee to develop other initiatives in areas that need to be addressed. And C, bring your concerns to existing bodies that already exist that deal with some of those other issues. As with all the subcommittees, the DEI exists in a purely advisory capacity. It has no decision-making power on its own. It can only make recommendations to the full school committee, who in then turn must decide whether or not to place its recommendations on the agenda for a vote. In this way, the DEI operates no differently from the wellness subcommittee, the policy subcommittee, the building subcommittee, CLAC, etc. We have not contracted with any vendor at any price for an equity audit. That is on the agenda for tomorrow night's meeting. So if you're interested in hearing about that, please come here tomorrow night at 6 o'clock right here in the auditorium. There's no citizens' comments because it's a working meeting, but you can email them to us for the record. Notification about the creation of the DEI subcommittee and the application process was sent out on the district listserv through my campaign social Facebook page and advertised on the town's social media pages as well. Among other things, the application form asked for demographic information, a lived experience that was motivating applicants to want to serve, and to ensure that we had representation from key community stakeholders, we asked that applicants note any relevant positions held in the NK community or spheres of influence that they might have had to help us create an inclusive education environment. We did not ask for political affiliation. We received 52 applications. It was very difficult to narrow it down to the 13 people who were ultimately selected. That selection process was done by myself, along with Dr. Mansieri, Brian Lally, who's the HR director, and Dr. Auger. There were so many qualified people who were not chosen, and some of them spoke here tonight. When you have a cap on the number of people that you can take, there's no way that everybody is going to be happy with the outcome. But we do believe that the final makeup of the committee represents the best group of people to examine what the committee was created to do, which is to examine the district's policies, practices, and procedures through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. The committee has people who represent each school in the district, their parents, teachers, administrators, community members, current and former students. They represent different races, genders, sexual orientation, and religions. They have professional and personal experience in the areas of anti-racism, DEI, sexual orientation, gender identity, and faith. Most importantly, they all express the common goal of wanting to ensure that the NK schools represent a safe place for all children, one that models diversity and inclusion so that everybody can reach their potential. It's also important to note that they're all volunteers. I also want to note that the information on the applicants was requested via an APRA, which is an access to a public records request. By law, that information is entitled to be disclosed for the current subcommittee members, minus any personal information or information about minors. Only for the sitting committee members, not the ones who were not selected. After that information was provided, a group in town used the email addresses they obtained from the APRA and sent the committee members an email asking that they provide their political views and answer their own set of questions. That was the beginning of a pattern of harassment, intimidation, and bullying that has been carried out over the past 2 months by those who oppose the subcommittee and its work. Anonymous Facebook posts, public access appearances, websites, handouts, and tabling, all spreading misrepresentations and in some instances outright lies. Not once has anyone reached out to me personally to engage in a dialogue. People who I've been friends with for years are no longer speaking to me because of things that I've supposedly done. All of that's bad enough, and I knew what I was getting into to some extent when I ran on an anti-racism and education platform. But people aren't content just to go after me. They're also going after anyone who stands with me or is believed to be associated with me. A friend has had her business trolled. A company that I've never even spoken to has had their name dragged through the mud in a letter to the editor, and their credentials and gender identities maligned. And most recently, an anonymous email was sent to the members of the Rhode Island Association of School Committees demanding that the executive director be resign or be terminated, all because he expressed support for me during a Zoom call. One of the things that's often brought up by detractors of the DEI subcommittee is that there is no or minimal racism in North Kingstown, so there's no need for this type of work. The fact that the number of reported cases is so low is referred to over and over again. What I have heard directly from students' mouths is that they did not report things that happened to them when they were in school because they were afraid that they would not be believed or that the incident would not be received well. What I know from personal experience is that racism does exist in our community in overt and subtle ways. I also know that I've chosen to speak up for those who don't feel empowered to speak up. And look what I just described has been happening to me. Is it any wonder that middle or high school aged children would choose to stay silent? In the end, fear is our worst enemy. It's the enemy of a united community and of democracy. If we could all listen, really listen, and take a moment to reflect, not react, and then to engage in discussion, we could find a path forward. I'm not shaming anyone, I'm not anti-anyone, and I'm not calling anyone a racist. I'm only asking for people to be open to the possibility that not everyone walks through life with the same experiences. I consider it to be a privilege to have had so many people confide in me about their experiences in the NK schools. They've shared them because they want NK to be better, because they want the schools to be inclusive of both the majority and the minority, of the vocal and the silent. I think that having someone share a painful experience creates a type of bond with that person, and I don't take that lightly. What I want to say to them is that I see you, I believe you, and I will keep fighting to make sure that no one else has to be you. Thank you.
Thank you. So to get back to the ultimate motion at hand, we have a motion and a second as to changes to the current charge and charge of the DEI subcommittee. I'd actually like to make a motion to amend the existing motion. I need to borrow that. I printed it and forgot it. And I'll make my motion. We'll see if we get a second, and then we can discuss it. One of the proposed changes is for the school committee member to be a non-voting member. My motion would be to strike that section, which would be the words, "who will be a non-voting member." That's my motion. As well as where it says an additional school committee member who will be a non-voting member, I would strike the who will be a non-voting member. So that's my motion. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Mather. Sorry, yep. So I'm just, to clarify, I'm taking out the words who will be a non-voting member from both sections, where it's in the first sentence and in the second. What it would say now, to read what it would read otherwise, it would be, the DEI Special Subcommittee will be co-chaired by a member of the North Kingstown School Committee and a member of the NK Central Office Administration. It will also include an additional North Kingstown School Committee member, NKSD community members to include teachers, support staff, parents, and students, and will seek to include diverse perspectives. All members are to be proposed by the superintendent and approved by the North Kingstown School Committee. That's how it would read. So it would just take out the non-voting part.
The reason why I put this forward is because I feel if a school committee member is able to vote at the subcommittee level and then is able to vote at the school committee level, they get 2 bites at the apple, and that's too much power, quote unquote, on the same issue. And so that's why I put that forward. I just want to put that out there.
Sure, absolutely. So we're at the discussion part. So do you want to?
Chair,
yes.
Can I address that?
Yes.
Okay. So every single subcommittee that you have in North Kingstown, the school committee members who sit on those subcommittees vote. Now, keep in mind, every subcommittee is an advisory committee. So that means that all you're doing is voting to send something to the full committee. So it would be almost discriminating in this committee if the school committee members who sat on this committee were not voting. Because remember, all a subcommittee does is make a recommendation to send to the full committee. I don't think that we should single this committee out and have non-voting members.
Does that raise the question, though, should they be voting on any of the subcommittees?
Yes, because you're a vital member of every subcommittee, and we need your input as to whether something goes to the full school committee. That's why these are subcommittees, and that's why school committee members sit on them. For example, on policy, we want the input of the school committee who sits on that policy to be part of that, to send it. So then when it comes to the full committee, that school committee member can say, I'm on that committee, and this is why we did this. Okay. Same thing with negotiations, same thing with health and wellness, same thing with building. Any committee that school committees sit on are advisory, and we need you there. Because remember, all you're voting on is whether to send something to the full school committee or not.
Okay.
And just to even elaborate on that, I mean, I say it over and over again, and it frankly never mattered until this committee came along, okay? The school committee can accept the recommendations of a subcommittee, ignore the recommendations of a subcommittee, do exactly what the subcommittee said they didn't want to do. We're the school committee. They're there to do lifting for us. Okay, that's the purpose of the subcommittees, to flesh things out, take a look at things, bring it back to us, give us their reasoning, and then we decide what we want to do. I don't think it's inappropriate for a school committee member to have a vote in that capacity, even though, I mean, I see your point, you're kind of voting on it twice, but it's really only the school committee vote that actually really matters for anything. And another analogy that I'd give is if you talk about the legislature or the Congress, there are subcommittees that are filled with nothing but legislators who vote as to whether or not legislation should move up, and then they vote again when it comes to the full floor. It's the same thing, and I just don't see any reason to treat this, and I understand the reason for your suggestion. Just personally, I don't think that there's a reason to treat this committee any differently than any of our others with respect to that. I personally don't have a problem with the other, changes about adding another member. I think they should also be a voting member. Again, we have 2 school committee members on many of our committees, most of our committees, in fact. This one, for whatever reason, when we formed it, we only had 1. So, I mean, I support adding another school committee member. And the reason we have 2 and no more than 2 is we have 5 members. If we were to ever have 3 on a committee, that would be a quorum, and that would be an open meeting violation. So we can have 2, but not more than 2. Any more discussion on the amendment, the motion to amend? All right, then if there's no discussion, we will vote. And just to explain this, again, how this works, Robert's Rules-y wise, if that is a phrase, this is a vote on the amendment. So if you vote yes, it means the words non-voting member come out of the original motion, and then we talk about the motion as amended if it passes. If you vote no, you're saying you still want the person to be non-voting, and we'd vote on what was proposed originally. Okay, so having said that, all those in favor of the amendment? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the amendment passes unanimously. So back to the original motion, we would be approving the changes with the amendments that we just made. Is there any further discussion about that? Okay, then I would ask for all those in favor of the motion as amended. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Now, moving on, unfinished business, 2021 school budget. Oh, did I miss something?
The appointment.
Oh, sorry, but I need to make a point here. Sorry, I subconsciously skipped that.
Okay.
We have a little issue with the way the agenda is worded because of what we just did.
So, Mr. Chair, the item on the agenda says appointment of additional non-voting member. That's not what you're doing right now. So I recommend that this not be done tonight and have to be put on the next agenda where it says appointment of additional DEI subcommittee member.
So I'll ask for a motion to table item 5, 6, 7. All those in favor? Aye. So it's tabled. So we can
You didn't get a second.
Oh, sorry. Motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Okay. Now all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we will bring this up at our next meeting, just as a, purely housekeeping. Sorry, didn't think it all the way through when we worded the agenda item. Dr. Auger, yes.
Sorry, before too many people leave tonight, I just wanted to, and I apologize for not doing this sooner, but Brooke and Gabriel, welcome to as our student representatives to our committee tonight. Why don't you grab that microphone and take over the whole meeting for us, please? No, really, I'd like you to introduce yourselves and talk about your role in student government and what brought you to I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you,
you will.
quick word from you will be really nice right now.
Yeah, so I'm Brooke, and I'm a senior here at North Kingston High School. And Gabe and I won the past election, so we just recently got our positions. And we're hosting our first meeting sometime next week. And we have a lot of ideas that we're going to bring up in the upcoming meetings, but we're very excited for our new positions and new roles. And we just love the platform that we were given and are very excited.
So my name is Gabriel Anthony. I'm a junior at North Kingston High School. Like Brooke said, I won the election back in June, just received our positions like last week when the school year started. When we have our next student union meeting, we'll discuss our goals, and then the next school committee meeting, we will just let all of you know what those are. I think that's everything.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for not introducing you sooner. Sometimes we kind of go right into the pool, so to speak, and that was definitely the case this evening. All
welcome.
Right. So welcome. So unfinished business 2020 to 2021 school budget. Mrs. King, anything there?
Nothing.
And 2021 to 2022?
Nothing.
CIP existing bond or future bond?
Nothing.
And we don't have any policies up. And then under new business, we just have reports with a disposal notification. Any questions on that? If not, we've reached a motion to the end of our agenda. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion from Mr. Mather, second from Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming. And those of you get season tickets if you're still here at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.